So here we are, sharing secrets of the soil with me, your host, Regenerative. Hello, soil lovers, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Soil. I'm your host, Regenerative, and I am so excited for today's guest. If you've not been living under a rock, you've probably seen it on a documentary on Netflix called Kiss the Ground. And so today, I'm joined by our American guest, Finian. Welcome to the Secrets of the Soil podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Now, you don't need to convince me because I'm a soil advocate and everyone knows in our soil loving community how excited I get about soil. But I'm curious to know your story about Kiss the Ground. So share with our listeners a little bit about Kiss the Ground.
Great. Well, I became a soil lover technically more about 9 years ago, but a little back history on me is I did grow up in the countryside, gardening in the back, and I was homeschooled. So I spent quite a bit of time in the backyard, gardening, doing composting and all that. But I didn't really have any of the aha moments of understanding the vast significance of healthy soil on a landscape, climate, biodiversity, watershed, understanding until about 9 years ago. I've always been an activist most of my life and very connected to how can I make a difference? How can I help make a difference? And to be totally frank, I was feeling more and more apathetic about humanity's ability to impact anything on the do good side. It was more on the how do we curb our bad a little bit more. And then I was really lucky to have a friend named Ryland who was in New Zealand watching a conference called Can Human Beings Sustain Themselves on Planet Earth? And the first 5 panelists essentially said no at the rate we're going. And then the last gentleman, his name is Graham Sate, he spoke and he said, well, everything they've said is true. We've really lost sight or disconnected ourselves or not understood at all this amazing opportunity called humans working with nature to rebuild soil. And this was not only on a carbon sequestration potential as a sink for it, but also on a functionality of everything in the world: drought, fertility, desertification, human suffering at large, as well as planetary health. And so Ryland was really moved by this moment he had there, and he came back very lit up and inspired. And he was able to convince this gentleman, Graham Sate, to stop in Los Angeles on his way to San Francisco and present to a kind of random group of us. And Ryland, knowing me as his kind of activist friend, we grew up together in upstate New York, and then we were out in LA, and he's like, I think you're going to really dig this, and enrolled me in helping put on this event for Graham Sate. And 4 hours later, the dots had really been connected. And really what it was moving from this state of, like I mentioned, like slight major apathy in a way of like, what can we really do in the face of these major catastrophes? And I consider myself pretty knowledgeable. I mean, when I spoke to my general public friends or whoever was out there, like I always felt like I was on the know on climate change, on drought, and all these things that we're facing. And I was like, wait a minute, if I didn't know about this stuff, if I didn't understand this, probably most people don't know about this. And that was kind of the shock moment I had. So we went back to Ryland's that night, and we were all excited about this news from Graham Sate. And we basically said, if this is all true, if all of what he's saying about soil health and the ability to rebuild it and its functionality, if this is all real, this is the biggest news ever. And we would kind of be jerks if we didn't take our abilities and do whatever we can to help get the word out about this. Because at that time, 8-9 years ago, there was hardly anything about this in the public, short form media, easily comprehensive infographics or whatever. There was just very little out there for anyone to understand it. So that was really the moment for me, was like, I know in my soul that this is something that people can grasp the same way I did. They can have the same aha moment of this incredible respect and awe for the incredible world under our feet. And if it happened to me, it can happen to enough people in the world that we have those who are the type of activators, activists, and everything that can get behind this, and we can radically change humanity's trajectory. So it was with that hope that and kind of confidence in us as humans that we could see this, that Rylan and I and a group of others set off to create Kiss the Ground, and the rest is history.
And what a beautiful history it is. I can totally relate with that whole aha moment. And soil lovers, if you're there listening, and this could be your aha moment, because the world underneath our feet is absolutely so fascinating, and I can't stop learning about it. And it feels like you're very similar to that. Secrets was established very similar to the timeframes that you're speaking of. And I did notice that, because when I got around the Soil Advocate program, I went and dug a little bit deeper and said, who's these people in Kiss the Ground, and what are they all about? And I want to be a Soil Advocate. This sounded really cool. And I saw videos from yourself recording in people's backyards and hanging out with Alan Savory Institute from like 8, 9, 10 years ago. And I see the same thing with Farming Secrets. Why do you think it's taking so long for this narrative, for this conversation to hit heart and hit the soul?
I've never been asked the question quite like that, but what immediately came to mind as soon as you said it was there just weren't enough people who got it and were passionate about sharing it. That's really when I started Soil Advocate training, and I think you probably heard me say in Soil Advocate training, the reason for this course is the running up against like, how many people have I seen at all these conferences? If this stays in this niche bubble, we're all screwed, quite honestly. And so my goal with the Soil Advocate training was to scale the ability for thousands, if not millions of people to take on being messengers and being confident messengers in this solution. So if we look at, Al Gore's Climate Reality, as an example of like getting a bunch of people who can continually perpetuate a message, we were far, far, far behind in terms of the revelation of soil as this huge platform and ability for humanity to kind of solve our crises we put ourselves in. So that was really the thought of mine of like, we can't have people sitting on the sidelines, going to these conferences, watching the same people speak. We need them as the leaders at new conferences, at different places, at different forums, in different communities than are currently being spoken to. So it was really a numbers game of like, we got to make it available. So Kiss the Ground, the movie, of course, is like wide scale availability. But how do we make this available? And then for those who are excited about it, of being like, yo, this is my thing. This could be my thing. Get in now. Like what you're doing. It's like, get into the game now. Gabe Brown wasn't a farmer. I wasn't a soil advocate, but it's like, if you see that you can actually help shape this future, I say this is like the .com era right before it started. Like get in, find your niche, see how you can be helpful. And by God, you're going to be really freaking helpful. So do it. Get in now.
I love that. The .com bubble, I agree. I was too young to take advantage of that. And I'm not too young now. And maybe I wasn't, maybe that was limiting beliefs. But I really love the fact that you say it doesn't matter what you're doing, because I love the intersection of different industries. I love when soil meets marketing, like what's happened in my world, when soil meets technology and all the tech that's coming from that. And when soil meets, spirituality, and seeing a lot of people creating. I interviewed someone the other day who's writing music about the microbiome world of the soil, using the soil as inspiration to be a songwriter. Like this is super exciting. And I know your mission is to awaken people. Do you feel like enough people are now awakened and now it's about action taking and spreading, or there's more work to be done in that area?
Well, you've been through the course, so you know that we have the theory of change is people's view, and then actions, and then outcomes. And the downfall of so many movements, maybe you did this on purpose, the downfall of so many movements is that they think, oh, we're enough of us know, we're in a clique. And some movements like to be in a clique, quite frankly, and that's been their downfall. But they move into the action in a clique, and then they move into their outcomes, and it's such a small blip on the global scene that it doesn't mean lasting impact. And they don't think Coca-Cola and Cheerios have been advertising since they came about, and they're still going to keep advertising. Coca-Cola has been advertising and ruining the world forever. They're not turning around their ad spending dollars. Why on earth would we ever, at this teeny stage of development of the soil health movement, would we consider ourselves permeating enough of culture? We're never going to be done. So that's where I always circle the awareness side, which is what shifts people's view. That awareness bubble, all of us perpetually, forever need to up our game of sharing this message, connecting with others, making this be the world's idea going forward.
Yeah, I love that. Being in a soil lovers clique, I think that's a clique that I like to belong into. It's definitely where the cool kids are hanging out, I reckon, these days. And I that whole narrative of people attend a workshop or label themselves, I guess, as a soil advocate and think that that's enough, but it is, actions speak louder than words. And so I tend to align with that view of that. More needs to happen, and it will never be, it's like the word regenerative. It never stops. It's always improving. It's compounding. That's the exciting part of this world.
Exactly. And that's where and I just hope people get infected with this of, if you're dreaming of this, you want things to happen faster than they do, of course. But if you're dreaming of this world and believing that it's possible, you are seeing years in the future of this stuff happening, and what it takes to shift belief in people such that, large quantities of land and agriculture management and ecosystem management is happening at scale in perpetuity. It's going to take ginormous amounts of belief from people. So if you look at the paradigm right now, most people, most educated people who are aware of this or thinking about this world of what we're facing, or have read the IPCC report, for example, that I haven't finished reading, their belief is Mad Max. Their belief is the world turning to desert and water scarcity and water wars. That's what they believe in. But most people don't believe in is regeneration, is utopian cities. Most people don't believe that. They think that's way more far-fetched than the Mad Max scenario. And that's a major problem. So that's where I feel like action is key. Of course, I'm not saying that at all, but anyone who's going down the line of action, how are you making this available to thousands of other people in your wake? Or are you closing the doors to them to click out? Don't do that. Don't click out this thing, because everyone needs to exponentially scale how many more people they're making this available to.
Yeah, love that. And the ripple effect is just contagious. I like you used the word before about being infectious, because it is something that you can't unlearn. As I discover more about the soil, my mind blows all the time. And I don't understand why this isn't common knowledge. Like this should be taught at school. We've been talking about the word regenerative for a little while, and there is a lot of mixed opinions about what this word regenerative means. And I don't know whether we need to define it. I think there's a beautiness in that. But I'd like to know, what does regenerative mean to you?
I really try to simplify it the most, and there's so much room for unlimited discussions and unlimited evolutions of what regenerative can mean, and the circles within nested circles of what it does mean in technicality, and what it means, what you mentioned before, compounding. It's so infinite, and it's so, the minutiae are so small and so big, from everything from the concept of it in your head to what's actually happening biologically on the ground, of life begetting life, or carbon begetting water and water begetting carbon. The whole thing, it's just infinitely complex and infinitely regenerative capacities as life is evolved that way. But one thing that's slightly frustrating for me is that people's context of other titles for things like organic, like biodynamic, or what have you, their descriptions of how something's being done versus its outcome. Like, it's really crazy to me when we talk about the word regenerative has a meaning. It's a very, very powerful meaning. It's not weird that the word regenerative was chosen to represent regenerative agriculture, because that word has so much power. It means different things than the word restore. It means different things than the word sustain. It has such an incredible meaning behind it that its meaning alone should be and can be the umbrella guide to what we're trying to achieve in our agriculture, in our ecosystem management, in our human health management. If something is regenerating more than degenerating, that is a good thing. And if our agriculture can be regenerating versus technically degenerating, very little things are actually sustaining that. That's kind of impossible because it's either getting regenerated, higher functioning state as its outcome, or degenerated, lower functioning state as its outcome. So I'm all about the infinite worlds that live inside of it and getting into detail of culturally and mindset wise what this really means for us as humanity. But at the very basic stage, I give this tool to all the advocates I train is like agriculture, regeneration. Put those two together, agriculture that's causing regeneration. That means while you're performing your agriculture, producing food, fiber, or fuel, you are regenerating an ecosystem, a landscape, so that it's moving to a higher functioning state. So that's the basic thing that I think everyone should be equipped with. And then when you start debating, be like, is regenerative the new organic? Be like, organic can be regenerative.
Yeah.
This guy who's conventional can be regenerative. This person over here doesn't have any labels on their farm. They can be regenerative. Is it helping the ecosystem regenerate?
Yeah, I love that. And looking at the outcomes, is today better than yesterday? Is this year better than last year? Is now better than 20 years ago? There is no timeline. It's just, is it stepping in the right direction forward? And I think it can, become a little bit overwhelming. And I want to touch on the IPCC.
Well, one really quick thing on that is like people are so fascinated with carbon sequestration, right? Yep. But if you're looking at a long-term trajectory of regeneration out in California, for example, you can have a field that's done applications of compost and grazing that has a less of a reduction of soil carbon than the untreated plots. And its functioning state, meaning when it rains, when we do get good conditions, its ability to regenerate is far superior than that degraded one. That is setting up for regeneration, even if the technicalities of carbon sequestration aren't amounting to that at that exact moment. So this is part of it too, is like, are you prepared for rapid healing, or are you sitting on the table in the doctor's office with burns all over your body and only in a IV pump that's keeping you alive? Be like, well, that's very different than setting up the stage so you'll have rapid regeneration when it can happen.
Yeah, setting up that environment to embrace that methodology, I think is and so many people have experienced that, where they see plants and things germinate that they never put seeds there. It's been dormant for who knows how long, and all of a sudden the conditions are right, and up comes all this native grasses or plants, and it's like, that's how Mother Nature works. You're not meant to always be understood.
Sorry to keep jumping in here, but like my friend who worked on the regeneration project in Saudi Arabia, so much of what they were doing was setting up so that when the rains hit, which they always do, instead of them all running off in a day or two, they were able to significantly slow, sink, and spread water over the course of 4 years. That matters. So the setup, it wasn't like they got regeneration magically in a moment, but they set up the conditions so that when water happened, it moved through the landscape differently, which set up a domino effect, a perpetual compounding effects of regeneration occurring. So it's so much in our thinking and belief that regeneration can happen when we start taking these big actions to have it happen.
Yeah, I love that. And I just want to touch on the word that you said there. Everything you're saying is amazing, but you just said something there about slowing the spread and sink of water. Is that how you quoted it?
It's not my quote. I'm spacing on his name right now, but a gentleman who's OG in this movement from Northern California. What's his name? That's his quote: "Slow it, sink it, spread it." Of water. It's really the origin of how regeneration is going to happen on a degraded, dehydrated landscape.
Yeah, we have Peter Andrews here in Australia who studies the Australian landscapes and rehydrating the land using, gravity.
He's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And, he's got a thing called slow the flow. But the way you said that is just really, really interesting because, when done correctly, we can slow the water down. We can get it deeper. We can have, more hydration. And I think, that's just, paradigm shifts, the soil lovers that are listening, just start thinking about that. Like, how can you slow the water on your property? How can you make it spread further? Sink it deeper into your ground. Like, this is all amazing stuff. You don't then have to wait for the rains as everyone does in this farming world.
Yeah. I mean, we had a soil advocate. I don't know if it might've been you. I don't know. They sent us a television clip of farmers. They had finally seen the irony. It rained in a huge rain a couple of years ago in Australia. And they saw the farmers were like jumping for joy. And it was this soil advocate's first time of being like, oh my God, our farmers are jumping on bare ground. The water is accumulating at the surface and running off in brown, muddy rivers. The farmers are still celebrating the rain. And this advocate for the first time was seeing like, it's going to be a drought again in a month or two.
Yep.
And that was their first time because they understood the difference of the ability of the soil or the ecosystem to absorb, retain the water versus it doesn't matter how much it rains. It's how well the water absorbs and retains it.
Yeah. And all the nutrition that's probably lost in the topsoil and the erosion, so it's right. Like, here's a positive event of rain, but there's so many negatives attached to it if you don't have the right paradigm in your mindset and seeing, the landscape.
Effective or ineffective rainfall. That's what Alan Savory calls it. That's the bottom line. Around the world, IPCC report, all this stuff is like, what if it just said effective or ineffective rainfall? That's all we care about. That could change everything. But instead, we're just freaking out without any direction to go. If we had effective rainfall across the world and we're working towards that, we would make leaps and bounds of progress versus having a bunch of paper pushed around.
Yeah, I love that. And we've talked about this report a lot, and I don't blame you for not reading it. It's 1,300 pages long, and just a summary is 39 pages. So, and this is part one of the report. So to all those who are reading it, kudos to you. I think that's, I want to talk about that because I see headlines coming on and I worry that some of these headlines could put people into a bit of a panic state or anxiety. They're talking about now like climate anxiety. And I just want to, play my part in to say, it's okay, we've got this. What's something that you can share in regards to, okay, there's red alert, there's all these headlines, it's crisis time, it is with all seriousness, we need to do something. And like yesterday was, 10 years ago was the better time, but let's just start now. What's some of the advice that you can share with people? Don't need to go into the details of the report, but what are some of the things that can comfort people to know that we've got this?
I think we've got this is an overstatement, not to play against you here, but I would say the way I'm stating it is we can do this, meaning we can fix it. And one of the most important things around that, we've got this, I feel like makes people feel like someone else is going to do it. We desperately need their participation. And I think
that's been a big problem in this space is everyone's like, someone's got this.
Well, someone's obviously got to fix this. But when we talk about regeneration, why it's so crucial of a word and a concept is regeneration isn't usually an essential phenomenon unless something has been degraded or broken down. It's obviously always happening in any living system continuously, just to be clear. But when regeneration is most important is when something is rebounding from harm. And so when we look at the IPCC report and we're not getting the message that something's broken and it can be fixed versus we're saying there's just too much carbon in the atmosphere, we're all screwed, we're on runaway climate change. We go back to ineffective or effective rainfall. So when you have broken soil, you know this better than anyone out there can take a plate of flour from their kitchen and 2 pieces of bread from their kitchen and demonstrate the difference of broken soil and healthy, aggregated, functioning, not broken soil. And that's what we're talking about worldwide here. When we say this is the state of affairs that we're dealing with right now, what isn't talked about enough is that 75% of the world's land is deemed degraded, broken, not working. So again, we go back to effective rainfall. When it rains and we're then dealing with a flood because the soil didn't infiltrate water. Now, this is some averages from Texas here. A half an inch of water infiltration for if a half an inch of rain falls, it takes over an hour on average for ranches in Texas to absorb a half an inch of water. In regenerative transition, we're seeing in 2 years or so, many of those ranches are able to absorb a half an inch of water in under 30 seconds. An hour or under 30 seconds. You expand, that's per acre. You expand that to 5,000 acres. All of the sudden, mitigating a watershed's flooding potential is huge. That's where when we say something's broken, we can regenerate it so it functions again. We're not saying that we're going to fix climate change all of the sudden, but in terms of the risk mitigation, which is right now the most pressing factor, when we get heavy rains, when we get extended droughts, when it's much hotter, are we setting up to handle that in the best of our ability? Number one. Number two, what the heck did we use to rebuild the functioning soil? Carbon that's currently causing a greenhouse effect in our atmosphere. That's the glue that built the metaphorical cup back together, the functioning soil, the aggregated soil, so it works again. That glue, that carbon-based glue, came from carbon in the atmosphere inevitably. That's where it has to come from. So literally the problem is the solution, and that's where we're saying we desperately need to start moving up this comprehension of resilience and risk mitigation, because it is the kind of practical, regional, state, federal, country by country, dealing with these intense problems. I love Al Gore. He's an incredible human being, but sometimes climate change equals flooding in Syria. You're like, well, no, when they nationalized land in Syria 60 years ago and had rapid rates of degradation because farmers who'd never farmed before started farming land that's extremely brittle in an already brittle environment, made it so that landscapes turned to desert within 20 years, and then mass amounts of people moved to the cities. Now that flooding that's happening in Syria is because thousands and millions of acres aren't absorbing any water, and you're getting heavier floods. So that the mitigation capacity for this is extremely important for local peoples everywhere. And the stuff we need to build it back so it's functioning is literally the problem everyone's talking about, which is too much carbon. So I could go on this forever, but it's really critical that we're saying, when we look at the IPCC report, reframing that of like, soil's broken, it's not functioning, we can fix it. The glue we need to fix it, to put it back together, is the carbon in the atmosphere that's causing a problem.
Yep.
That can be your message to people who are panicking about the IPCC report.
Yeah, I love the distinction that you've made on that, because I think people, when they see what's happening in the media, is they see carbon as the problem. And it's not, it's just where it is. And if we demonize carbon and think putting carbon in the soil is also bad, that's the 100% the wrong conversation. And so it's just where it is that it needs to be fixed, and it needs to be under our feet, so that way we can all eat. So, and so many links, and I know you don't need to be converted to this, but, the soil lovers who are listening, that realization that when nature heals itself in one area, it becomes a solution to the next problem and to the next problem. And it's a nice domino effect, as you said before as well. More nutrition food, less flooding, more micro water cycles. So you've got more moisture in local communities, builds up communities, the community spirit lifts again. Like, it just never ends, and I get excited about that.
Biodiversity collapse. I mean, we have the biggest rate of biodiversity loss, but where we see regenerative agriculture happening around the world, biodiversity is coming back rapidly, especially in rangelands, across Africa, across the United States, and Australia, New Zealand, where we're having regenerative impact. Like, I don't know if you know the Audubon Society over here, but like, they're all about bird populations. But a big moment for them shifting from their paradigm of conservation was, wow, our most rapid increases of bird populations are on these regenerative farms that are moving from overgrazing, where the grass is an inch tall, to regenerative grazing systems where the grass is supposed to, grow itself back and the rotations. Those systems where prairie birds are coming back in droves because that's the conditions they were evolved to live in. They weren't evolved to live in thousands of acres of 2-inch grass. So these are things that are just profound in terms of the repercussions of infiltration of water, restoration of lands, watershed function, biodiversity increases, et cetera. So yeah, you're totally right. It's amazing.
Yeah, I love that as well. I just want to make the distinction note, like, there's conservation areas that are researching and funding to bring back species, and then yet they appear naturally on a regenerative farm. It's like, what are we doing?
The most ironic ones is there's this place outside of Los Angeles. They did regenerative grazing for a while. Then the state of California saw native species that they hadn't seen in years come back to that regenerated landscape, and then took the land back and put it in conservation again. The irony is hilarious, but that's where we're dealing with a need for many more people, not to be like, oh, I hate you, you're doing the wrong thing, but to bring people's minds over to regeneration from the sustainable mindset, from the conservation mindset. We need to bring them over to regeneration because it's obviously a much more fun world to be in, and it's more of the practical way of making solutions at scale.
So much fun. I can say ditto to that. I want to talk a little bit about the documentary because I think, for me, being a soil advocate and a soil lover, it was really hard to talk to all my friends about it. And so I really want to thank you for creating a piece of content that is absolutely magical to watch, that I can just point people to. And I always say to them, just say, we love the soil and we want to kiss the ground, and I try and plant that seed so they remember it when they go back home. And I've had so many people thank me for referring it. And I want to thank that back to you for creating it and the space of that movie. And so
quick shout out to the filmmakers, Josh and Rebecca from Big Picture Ranch. We were a big part of that. We were a partner in creating it, but they were the main architects behind it. I was just, connecting. Oh, you got to have Ray. You got to do I was always like trying to pull the movement into it behind them, but they did that movie, and we're just so grateful. Yeah.
You were being the carbon. You were gluing everyone together. And I think, that's the years and years of compounding of learning and being in the right room to meet all these people and have that holistic view on the space. The movie's been out for a little while now. I guess the society and the regenerative movement has moved forward. I love the movie, and I'm not saying it needs any changing, but if you could add, edit, delete, change any part of the movie, see something extra in it, what would it be that you would kind of add to the narrative today in 2021?
I mean, definitely just a reference back to people. This movie took 7 years to make. So we started making this movie less than 2 years into starting our big push into this movement. So Kiss the Ground had just been born, and then we started into this movie. So some of the people who were in the rooms, when you went to the conferences, when you started Googling, when you started learning about this stuff, part of the faces and the lack of certain perspectives that you see in this movie are because of where we started. And again, it's like, there's some shame in that a little bit of but at the same time, it's like, we were trying to figure out how we can help this movement from what we saw in the limited perspective and view that we were looking into it from. And so, having said that, as we progressed, we were trying to make sure this was a more comprehensive and representative film, but lo and behold, cutting room floor, things not connecting, things not matching, many executive producers, et cetera. The film that came out definitely didn't have enough of a representation of the story. So at this point, we're just like, this is a part of the regenerative agriculture perspective, a regenerative agriculture movement. This isn't it. This isn't the whole perspective. There are so many voices that are just not in here or included. And we're doing a lot of work now on our coming media that's coming up to make sure that when we talk about regeneration, there's a lot more media and focus on especially indigenous cultures who have really been at the root of a lot of these concepts, and especially the mindset when you talk about this mindset shift that occurs when people move from the mechanical mind into a more nature understanding, a reconnection, a stewardship mentality. That has been existent in many indigenous cultures around the world. and still is very much at the root of their culture. And to not have included that in the feature length enough was definitely a hard thing for us, and that we're trying to do our best to create media that does make sure those stories are told and make sure that those voices are lifted up.
Yeah. Well, 7 years of work into a very short feature film is a very challenging. I can relate. And I think there's this thing like when you know so much or you've learned so much, it's very hard, not hard, but it's the whole ignorance is bliss. Like sometimes it's hard. I struggle sometimes to tell the story from a more simple point, because it's like I know so much. I think I walk onto a farm and I'm like, you can do this, you can do that. And oh my God, there's all these opportunities, and the farmer's going, hang on, like, what are you saying? I need to get rid of my tractor. No, that's not what I'm saying. And so I think that having a movie that depicts that, and even bringing in more of the consumer story, and like there is choice, and you can be an educated consumer to go in and buy and be smart about where you're moving your dollars. The film did a great job in that balance of the ag space, and not being overwhelming to it being an ag story, but also being a prosumer choice kind of movement. So I think it's really exciting and I see more and more documentaries coming onto Netflix and other streaming services, and I think that's exciting. Like it's a trend, and we're early in that piece, and it's only going to kind of compound and get more widespread. So, and this was the foundation of it. So really, really fun to do that. I want to ask our signature question, because we want to give the soils a voice. Are you ready to be our voice of the soil?
Yeah.
All right, let's do this. So if you were our soils on planet Earth, what would you tell us humans?
It's a
doozy.
I mean, there's just like the word, it doesn't feel natural to say it, but it's just like this, come on, like, how have you not heard this message I'm trying desperately to get across to you? Like, how can I make it more obvious that like you broke me and I need your help? Like, the thing that I would say if I was the soil is like, look, this is reminding me of a short media piece we were making called "The Mother Nature and Man Have a Therapy Session," and we haven't filmed it yet, but it's a whole script we have. It's a comedy. It's pretty funny. But she's essentially saying is like, look, you hurt me. Like, it has been you who has done this destruction, but like it literally has to be you who helps that. And I'm almost at the end. Like I'm the tipping point is here. It's now. We have a very short window to begin repairs, and you have to be the species that does the repair. There's literally, you've done so much damage that there isn't another species. You can't even rewild. You can't even just let it be anymore, because in 80% or more of the Earth's surface that has been degraded, it's too brittle for me to do the repair on my own. Like, I actually need you to step in and procure land management and be a steward here. Otherwise it's going up in smoke, and then I'll be around next time, but this lifetime is coming to an end unless you rejuvenate and regenerate me. So she'll come back, she'll be fine in the long run, but this incarnation of her life is about to go over. And so we're at that point where we're going to have to be the midwife or whatever to help this moment, to make sure that we step in to help, because we're there. And so she's begging us that we, hey, you have to be the species that does this, because you've caused this damage. And there's not an animal out there. There's not a giraffe that's going to drastically change this region and make it work again, because they don't have the tools. They weren't designed to do that. They didn't evolve to. You can. You have hands, you have tools, you have ingenuity, you have love, and use it all.
Absolutely beautiful. I think that is definitely a great voice of the soil. We have heard it We've and now we need to hear it. Like you said, listen, like hear me, hear my pain. I love that analogy of a therapy session between Mother Nature and a man. And whether we use Mother Nature as the soil as well, like that's the same. It's all one piece. And I think you're very right. And I say this all the time, like this, we're saving the world, but the world will save itself. We need to save the world with us on it. If we want a civilization that works with Mother Nature and we want to thrive as well, then that's what we need to solve, because the planet will heal itself. So the soil will bounce back. It will take a long time without us, helping it along and encouraging it and being there as its midwife and nurture it. But I think, we definitely have to play a big part in it, and a great time to be doing that. So I'm very grateful for your time. How can everyone hang out more with you and Kiss the Ground? I know you create a lot of content. What's the places they can hang out with yourself and Kiss the Ground?
Of course, the Soil Advocate training. There's another cohort starting in September, end of September. That cohort means that you can take the Evergreen course, but every week you have time to be with other students as well as myself live to get deep further and to get coaching and to work on getting over some of your hurdles that are in the way of being an empowered advocate. And so, I would say the cohorts are the most magical place to experience the Soil Advocate training. You can do it on your own whenever, of course, but that's a really fun experience. It takes 2 months essentially with a group of people from around the world, and it's a joy. So that's coming up in September. Also, just become a member of Kiss the Ground so you can get updates. There's so much going on right now on the policy front. I'm working just a little too hard right now on what's happening federal policy wise. But there's a lot of things to look out for. What can be borrowed, copied and pasted from all over the world. I encourage people to do that. There's far too many institutions and businesses and governments that don't copy and paste, and you can be the copy and paster. That was some of my original policy work, original advocacy work, was like, hey, did you see what San Francisco did? Hey, why don't we just cut and paste and do it in LA? Like, you can do that and be that person and connector and really serve very quickly and effectively serve governments or businesses or people taking this on in a bigger way. So I would do that. Stay focused on what's going on. Join the movement. You're a soil lover out there, people. So you're in already. So this is your movement, and it's time to shine and help and contribute. And we all have our different skills, and we can all grow in our different skills and ability to help.
Yeah, I love that ethos of copy and paste and owned by the commons. When I was in one of the live cohorts as well, and before you went evergreen, and I loved it because I was joining, lots of people from all around the world in a Zoom call. And this was before COVID, Zoom wasn't even common back then. And it was super fun. And I remember going through it, and just your permission to say, grab this slide and use it in a presentation, like go spread the word, like don't reinvent the wheel. And I think civilization has done that way too many times. I look at the world and I think, how do we not get the best rail system from there and copy and paste it here? And how do we not get the best road system from there and copy and paste it here? And yet everyone's trying to innovate and put ego in the way to do it our way. And it's like, oh, it's so exhausting.
One of the things that's so cool about this movement is like the generosity and the spirit of the leadership, the people who set the precedent for all of us. I think this movement just like it makes my heart sing when I'm just like, these people are so genuine and so generous and so willing to contribute. Like there's no other choice but to stand in that same vein and be like, if I'm making anything, because it's all based on things that other people did, I'm borrowing from them. So if I'm hoarding my thing, that's crazy. Obviously we all have to like put food on the table and we have businesses and things like that. But if you're somehow getting in the way of like ownership of things, it's kind of ridiculous because it's all built on and borrowed. And again, that was part of the indigenous myth, as I mentioned earlier, is like so much of this stuff originates as people who learned from generations of cultures and then brought it into a more dominant culture. And then it's like, it's still borrowing.
Yeah, I definitely have to say I learned my lesson coming from the marketing world. Everything's like TM'd and registered and trademarked and IP. And, that was the world I knew when I threw a TM on something once and everyone was angry. I was like, oh my God, I get it. It's not about profiting and IP and protecting it. It was more about creating that there was a new method or a new whatever it was. But I was like, nah, this is the lesson that I just learned today. It's like, it's about the commons. It's create it, take it, swipe it. I don't care. Like, this message is so important that if we're going to get into a courtroom to argue about who owned it first, that's the problem, and who's got time for that from my world anyway. Finian, it's been amazing hanging out with you. I know the soil lovers are going to get so much from this conversation, and I truly, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you for all the work that you're doing. You've set up a great landscape, and I know it comes from, the works of others of that, but we all, I was very blessed to have come into the Advocate program. I love to hear the fact that it's hybrid now, that you can still do evergreen and get the cohort experience. I think that's a great happy medium, because it's the people in the room that is what makes it really magical, in that community. It doesn't matter about borders. Mother Nature has no borders, and we don't need to do that in 2021 either. We're connected all over the world with technology. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent. Well, there you go, soil lovers. Don't get outside today. Sit inside, throw on Netflix, and get your mind dirty by watching Kiss the Ground. But always stay curious and keep digging deeper into our wonderful world of soils. I'm Regenerative. Well, soil lovers, that's enough secrets for one episode. I really hope that you enjoyed all the secrets shared during this conversation. But hey, let's not keep it a secret. Please share this podcast around, and make sure that you like it and leave us a review, because that really helps spread the secrets of the soil. Until next time, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into your soils.